Welcome to a story full of spiritual mysteries. Ismail Fakirullah, the saint who raised saints. In 1657, on the night of the first Friday of the month of Rajab in today's Aydınlı district of Surt, formerly known as Tilo, he was born on the night of Recep. Although his real name was Ismail, he took the name Fakirullah from the rank he attained on the path of truth. His lineage goes back to the Prophet Muhammad's uncle Abbas. His grandfathers migrated to Anatolia from Medina many years ago. His grandfather, Mullah Abdul Jamal, and his father, Maulana Qasim, were both scholars and served as head mudaris in the madrasas, the universities of the time. It is said that when Ismail was a baby, his mother breastfed him without besmel and did not feed him. Ismail's education began when his father took a special interest in him and taught him sciences at an early age. Fakirullah studied at the Fari Madrasa in Surt and grew up until the age of 24, becoming a scholar in the physical sciences and an expert in the spiritual sciences. He took a spiritual flavor from his prayers and therefore always performed them with pleasure. He paid attention to the rights of his parents and strived to obtain their prayers and consent through his behavior. After his father's death, Fakirullah succeeded him as head mudaris in 6 madrasas and began to educate students. Fakirullah showed with his exemplary life that Islam is a subtle humanity. He was so sensitive about halal and haram that when he went to cultivate his field to provide for his family, he would first perform ablution, then sow and reap, and after harvesting the harvest, he would work at the mill himself to grind it into flour, knead the dough from the flour, and bake the bread himself. In this way, he would make sure that nothing unlawful was mixed into his food. He would perform ghusl ablution every Friday, regardless of summer or winter. He tried to spend his nights in worship and his days in fasting in order to live in the world by remembering Allah at all times. Fakirullah, who lived Islam sensitively in the world, who enjoyed doing his own work, working in the fields and earning a living with his own labor, had a spiritual change at the age of 40 after returning from his Hajj pilgrimage, which caused him to turn more towards spiritual life. For 40 days, he stopped eating and drinking. He went on a spiritual inner journey, lying unaware of himself without speaking. At the end of 40 days, he opened his eyes, drank only a bowl of water and asked for sour pomegranate and ate it with bread. But his real spiritual enlightenment began one night when he met with an accident on his way to the mosque. This event began a period of ecstasy and spiritual enlightenment that lasted 8 years. On a Friday night in his late 40s, Fakirullah, who was on his way to the mosque, went out into the courtyard of his house in the dark. In the courtyard, there was a 15-meter deep, hollow, open-mouthed well with no water in it. Not realizing this well in the darkness, he fell into it. But with Allah's protection, nothing happened. He was unhurt except for a small scratch on his left eyebrow. When he realized that Allah was testing him with the attribute of Jalal, he prostrated himself in thanks to Allah, grateful that he had fallen from such a height and survived with only a scratch. He sincerely and earnestly sought refuge with his Lord. At that moment, suddenly the well expanded and filled with a lush green divine light. With this happiness, he dived into the sea of love. He received the flavor of directly experiencing divine truths. Then a spiritual assembly gathered around him. With their spirituality, he felt around him at that moment many saints such as Hazrat Haizar, Abdulkadir Gilani, Junaid I Baghdadi and Hazrat Uwais el-Qarani. And he was given the good news by these great awliya that he had attained the highest degrees in awliya, called Gavs Maqam. They made him drink the sherbet of love. Thus, he became the sultan of the wise men of the time, the sultan of the awliya of the awliya. While he was in this state, when the hours passed and the congregation waiting to perform the Isha prayer in the mosque saw that Hadrat Ismail Fakirullah had not come, they asked his house and neighbors. When they could not find him, they began to search frantically. At that time, a master weaver noticed a sweet sound coming from the well and immediately informed the people. The whole neighborhood gathered around the well with candles and lamps. But he was so immersed that he was not aware of anyone. They sent men into the well and pulled him out. When the great saint told this story in his own language, he said, I do not know that I fell into that well, nor do I know that they pulled me out. I said to those who wanted to pull me out, if you love Allah, let me go. I have nothing more to do with you. Go away from me. I don't remember that either. I only know that 2 people grabbed me and brought me home. But that night is as precious to me as Laylat al-Qadr, because Allah bestowed many favors and bounties on me there. Ismail Fakirullah spent 8 years in a state of ecstasy on the path of Sufism. Under the influence of the sherbet of love he drank in the well. He became closer to Allah through spiritual ascension in a state of istighraq, that is, by forgetting the world. Completely distancing himself from people and worldly life, he began to live alone. In this process, it is said that he was Uvasi, meaning that he benefited directly from the knowledge of Allah and the spirituality of the Prophet through spiritual means. In the 9th year after leaving the state of rest, when Ismail Fakirullah Hazrat Lari began to meet with his friends and students, he began to teach them the rules of his own, unique, Uvasi path, which was very similar to the path of Abdulkader Gailani Hazrat Lari. In his madrasa, he again called people from all walks of life to enlightenment through Islam, and on the other hand, he trained world-renowned scholars in both spiritual and positive sciences. Those who opposed and disrespected him fell into various troubles and regretted it. Those who listened to his words, on the other hand, were revived and found guidance. Among his many students, Mullah Osman and Mullah Muhammad were the ones he loved the most and allowed to serve him. These students, like 2 brothers, were honored to serve him for 10 years in the service of that caring father. Mullah Osman was the father of the famous scholar Ibrahim Haki of Erzurum, whose fame would later reach his teacher and spread all over the world. Mullah Osman had his son, Ibrahim Haki, who was only 9 years old, come with him in order to instill in his son the spiritual power of his teacher and to receive his blessing and be honored to be his student. He, too, entered the path of Sufism in the madrasa of Fakirullah and started both service and education. However, Mullah Osman and Mullah Muhammad died within a week of each other in the 10th year of serving their teacher. After them, Ibrahim Haki, who was still young, started to serve Fakirullah and to mature with his words that healed the sick hearts. And finally, with the sciences he received from his teacher in the madrasa, he progressed on the path of Sufism and became a famous Islamic scholar, Anatolia, a writer, poet, astronomer, physicist, psychologist, sociologist and encyclopedist, like Fakirullah. Fakirullah spent the last years of his life conversing with his disciple and caliph, Ibrahim Haki, on the secrets of the spiritual path and teaching knowledge to his students, the intellectuals of that period. His fame spread everywhere, and he was visited by statesmen. The great scholar lived his life with the awareness that Allah knows and sees our every state at every moment. Known for his long states of miraculous, spiritual disciplines in which he concentrated his attention on his inner world, controlling everything that passed through his mind and forgetting everything else by giving himself to his Creator. In 1734 he turned inward again and entered a spiritual ascension, a state of ecstasy. When he came to himself on a Friday evening, he gathered his family members and disciples around him, knowing that he would now pass from the life of this world to eternal life. He made a will. Ismail Fakirullah Hazrat Lari, who spent his life teaching science to people and explaining spiritual development to them through the religion of Islam, describes these last days of his beloved student and successor, Ibrahim Haki Hazrat Lari of Erzurum, in his famous book, Name, as follows. That pure soul entered the palace of the body and descended to the earth. He came to maturity and matured. He recognized Allahu Ta'ala and was recognized by people. He attained eternal grace and became a source of infinite feezes. He saw both worlds in the mirror of his heart and turned to his Lord alone. He embraced his orders. Thus, he was not deceived by the pleasures and delights of this world, but he took the path to be peaceful in the real world. Tired of the oppression of this world, he desired to reach the eternal realm as soon as possible. He wanted to throw his vigil like other living beings, because his pure soul seemed to be imprisoned in the tomb of the body. When he was over 80 years old, in 1734, he, the father of all, dived into the sea of the heart for a week. He reached the secrets of the spiritual realm and watched this realm. People thought that he had passed out due to illness. However, after nightfall on Friday night, he returned from that state to this world of feeling. He called his children and grandchildren to him and willed that they should learn knowledge and deal with their spiritual development. He said goodbye to those present, asking them to return his relics to their owners. Then he ordered them to recite Yasin-i-Sharif. During the recitation of Yasin-i-Sharif, the room was filled with such fragrance that it was as if oud and amber had been burnt. His children and grandchildren were in sorrow, but for him, that night became a night of celebration and joy. As the verse Solomon Kavlan of Yasin-i-Sharif was being recited, he surrendered his life to Allah by saying, Allah. His blessed soul went away, and his lively body remained. The mausoleum of Hazrat Fakirullah and his student Ibrahim Haki, who was a scholar of religion and astronomy, is one of the works that best demonstrates the point he reached in positive sciences. So much so that the light event in the tomb is world famous. Through a window in the wall built on the Contemplation Hill in the east of Tillow, the first rays of the rising sun on March 21st, when day and night are equal every year, pass through the window opening and break through the window of the tomb tower, illuminating the head of the sarcophagus of Ismail Fakirullah. In this regard, the saying, "If the first sun of the new year does not illuminate the head of my teacher, what will I do with that sun?" shows Ibrahim Hak's respect for his teacher. Ismail Fakirullah's life, spiritual discoveries and influence are still being told in these lands where he left his mark. We hope this video gives you a window into the life of this great man. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.